You know what really makes us mad? Is wasting money on CDs with only one or two good songs.
Yeah. Tell them about punk.
What's up, posers? Welcome to Punk Lotto Pod. I am your co-host, Justin Hensley.
I am your other co-host, Dylan Hensley.
And this is the show where we assign our guests a year and they choose one punk, hardcore, emo, or punk-adjacent album from that year for us to discuss. Today, we are joined by Olivia Maria of the band Cowboy Boy. They just recently released their new album, Good Girl, on Get Better Records, and it is a killer album. It's a fantastic record. Highly recommend you check it out. And what are we talking about today?
We are talking about the year 2013, and the album is Paramore by the band Paramore. A very quick turnaround on Paramore talk.
Yeah, just recently discussed Riot. We talk about it in the episode, but I gave our guests the chance to change their topic, and they both wanted to stick with Paramore. So
I think that there's enough different stuff to talk about on this record. I think it's worth talking about a distinctly different period. Now, if the next guest is like, I really want to talk about After Laughter by Paramore, we might have to 86 that one.
Well, that would require somebody wanting to talk about an album that came from the 2010s, which
Very
most
rarely
people
happens.
don't.
Yeah.
Olivia was one of the few who was interested. So
I'm glad just for the fact that we get to talk about like a record from the 2010s. Like that's doesn't happen enough on our show.
Yeah, it's very interesting how, well, I understand too. It's so recent that people are like, do I want to talk about that? But
Yeah, I mean, if you count 2010, it's over a decade.
yeah, that's true. You can follow us over there on the Patreon, where we are doing our weekly bonus audio for $1. That gets you access to all 25 episodes, I think, at this point over there. Maybe more. This week, we're doing a 5x5. My Spotify last of Film Scrabbles were acting up today, but I got them fixed, so we're still on for that.
Good, because I have been hard at work. I don't want to waste this one. I could have been listening to Samba records.
Yeah, which you can follow that over there on patreon.com/punklautopod. We have all sorts of social medias: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, voicemail 202-688-PUNK, email punklautopod@gmail.com, punklautopod.substack.com. I think that's everything. No one created a new social media. We don't need another one.
Well, I mean, yeah, and there's TikTok. Pivot to video.
Well, maybe my degree will be put to good use. But yeah, thank you so much. This episode is super fun. This episode was really great to talk about. I have plenty more to say about Paramore. And honestly, if a guest did pick After Laughter, I think I can find enough to fill an episode too. So
Depends. I'd have to listen to that record.
It's fun.
Yeah.
There's songs that sound like Donkey Kong Country. But yes, enjoy the show.
Sometimes I like to imagine what it would feel like to be pretty enough that you don't have to wonder if that's the reason they saw you naked and won't call. Isn't it crazy how two people can have opposite perceptions of the same situation? Now I stand in the mirror before taking a shower, trying to envision what you see. Now I'm twisted, contorting, and finding the angle. You got sick of seeing me. Somebody told me depression, I'm cursing insecurity, 'cause I still want somebody to tell me they want me, silence my fragility. I'm feeling stupid, didn't know how bad I needed till I had it, and now I can't have it. 'Cause now I wanna be your pet, hold me like your baby, I don't wanna be ugly. I wanna be your pet, say you think I'm pretty, take my heels off for me. I wanna be your pet, performing for affection, craving your attention. I wanna be your pet, hold me like your baby, I don't wanna be ugly. I wanna be your pet forever.
Olivia, thank you for joining us on the show today.
My pleasure. Hello.
Let's start with the promotional side of things. So Cowboy Boy just released their your new album, Good Girl, on Get Better Records. It's a truly amazing record. I was re-listening to it again today to get ready for the show, and I was just like, man, all these songs are bangers. So good.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that a lot. That's cool to hear.
How has the reaction been?
I mean, it's been amazing, honestly. Like, I feel like, going from this period of I guess, I don't know, like a year and a half has been really amazing, and it kind of feels like everything's sort of on fast forward in a sense. Like, I kind of feel like we went into this like just crazy quarantine period, sort of, being this baby band that literally nobody had ever heard of, and now we're like a baby band who marginally more people have heard of. And it's been really cool to take this thing that took us so long to create and have it be in the world and have people be sort of responding to it in, frankly, the exact way that I hoped that they would, I guess, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know, I always say that my goal as a songwriter is to sort of, straddle the line between, really kind of like hyper personal stuff and like really kind of universally relatable stuff. And I feel like my holy grail as a songwriter is somebody coming to me and saying, wow, I feel like you wrote this about me. And, a lot of the feedback that we've been getting about the record is people being like, wow, this feels really personal. This feels, really relatable to me. And that's really cool because, I mean, not only is that like exactly what I want and am going for as a songwriter, but it's also like just so cool to have written things that are so intensely personal to me, and knowing that those experiences are in a way kind of universal because other people are like, well, this feels like it was about me. This hyper personal thing about someone else feels like it's about me. So it's been awesome. It's been really cool.
I think really, really like personal and like almost detailed type lyrics, they have more universal appeal than you'd expect. I mean, it's maybe not every single person is going to have experienced the same thing, but you're going to find people who go, wow, this like verse is exactly what I've been through. Or like maybe not the whole song, but like this chorus is completely my experience. So like I feel like people connect with that type of lyric really strongly. So like you have a really, really cool lyric style. I was reading some of them today, which is funny because I'm like not a lyrics person who usually reads them.
Thank you. I really appreciate you saying that. And I agree. I think the things, the music that has sort of affected me the most strongly in my life has been, stuff that kind of does that, right? Stuff that is, intensely personal to the person who wrote it. And then I hear it and I'm like, this could be my diary. This could be about me. So yeah, I've always been a very sort of like lyric centric person. So I very much appreciate you saying that. It's cool to hear.
And you're in really good company with Get Better. That label is doing some amazing stuff.
Yes, 100% yes. Cannot say enough good things about Get Better. Even if we weren't a Get Better band, I would still have nothing but incredible things to say about the label and about the entire roster of bands. Everybody's incredible and also like really nice and cool and supportive. And yeah, it's truly been very special. It's been a very special experience to have this debut record come out on a label who, very genuinely very personally, I think, cares about it. And that's it's been amazing. It's been really cool.
How did you wind up working with them?
I cold emailed them.
Yeah.
Which is wild. It seems like a literal lifetime ago. And yeah, I sort of, was kind of steeling myself for just like a million doors slammed in my face. And I already just like had such a high opinion of Get Better, not just like roster wise, but also sort of like ethos wise.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a real, that was definitely like a hands shaking typing the email type of situation. And they got back to me like lightning fast. Like it felt like I was in the simulation, low key. Like I was like, there's no way that this really happened. Like I'm definitely dreaming. But yeah. So it felt like I don't know, like a perfect home for the record. So it's just, yeah, very, very exciting.
That's awesome. That's really cool to hear. Cause like, yeah, cold emailing is such a fun way to like, well, here's the deal. You know, here we'll put the record out. That's so fun.
Yeah, truly amazing. It's such like a pie in the sky thing. And I still am like totally in disbelief that it happened the way that it did, and just that I found this incredibly like caring home for the record. Like it's such a special thing when you find another person or another entity that like really cares as much about the thing that you care about as you do, especially when that thing is something that you are making, right? So, I can't think of a better home for the record. I can't think of a better experience to have had. So yeah, shouts out Get Better, the best ever.
And now you get to say your label mates with Fucked Up.
Yeah, right. I know. Crazy.
That's so neat. I'm so glad they got that. I want to know the story about how that happened, because that's wild. I love that.
Cool, yeah.
So the band is originally from Boston, but like half the band is still there, right?
Yeah. The band is me and Mike, and we met when we were both in college in Boston. And then I moved to Los Angeles in 2017. And we have sort of, I like to say that we kind of function like the Postal Service, except instead of like mailing demos back and forth, we like email them and FaceTime, and so like shouts out modern technology for like letting me still be in a band from across the country. It's pretty cool. We haven't seen each other since Mike was out here recording. I am not sure when this is going to come out, but as it stands at time of recording, I'm going to be in Boston next week and see Mike for the first time in however many months or years it's been since we recorded the record. So I'm pretty excited.
That's awesome. That technology has improved quite a bit as far as like music, especially. Like I remember hearing about bands like emailing files back to each other probably 10, 15 years ago for the first time, and even then I was like, whoa, how do you do that? But now you managed to do the whole album. I mean, some of it was in person, but
yeah,
writing the songs together.
The very tail end of it was in person. Everything else was completely internet based. Yeah, can you imagine like 10 years ago trying to like rely on the shoddy technology of like Skype in like 2011? Like, oh my god, I can't even imagine what that would look like. I definitely my band would have a different configuration if it were 2011 right now.
Yeah, I feel like we were doing the band. Dylan and I were in a band about 10 years ago, so I think like the coolest thing that we could do would be like, well, here's a MediaFire link to like the mixed final.
Yeah, I remember getting like WinRAR compressed, zipped files of like the record, like maybe like to give mix notes to the drummer because he like did all of the mixing, and that was it. Like that, everything else, like we did it all in person, recorded, and we were spread out across the state. So
Mhm.
we really could have utilized technology to our advantage, but we just didn't. Like, you just didn't think of doing it that way.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, it's so much easier now, right? Like, we're all just, like, it feels very strange to have not sort of like been in the same room with Mike for such a long time, but it doesn't even really feel that way when it comes to the band, just because it is so easy to sort of like, I mean, it definitely also helps that Mike is just like, I mean, incredibly talented, but we're also just like so much on the same wavelength. Like, it's really, I imagine it's not necessarily, super easy for like every band in the entire world to just like take everything completely online. But I just feel like Mike and I have been so synced up for such a long time that it kind of takes the element of surprise out of it a little bit, if that makes sense. Like, I never have to question whether or not something's going to get, lost in communication, or if we're going to, it's just, it's easy. And it means a lot to me that it's easy, because it hasn't always been that way in every project I've been involved in. So Mike and I are sort of a match made in heaven, I think.
Yeah, it's awesome. And like, he does bass, guitar, and drums on the record, which I'm always so impressed with people who can play so many instruments. 'Cause, I mean, I could barely play even one.
Yeah, Mike is amazing. Mike is like so incredibly talented, and yeah, I feel really lucky to be working with somebody who I not only like really love as a person, but also I'm just like so amazed by musically all the time. And he's really incredible, and his solo stuff is really sick. Like, all the stuff he's done with other bands is really sick. Like, he's just, he's awesome.
Well, that's awesome. Anything special planned that you're allowed to talk about? This is coming out probably 2 weeks after your Boston trip, so it'll probably be old news at that point. But
what is exciting that's coming up? I don't know when we're gonna like officially announce stuff, but we've got some local stuff coming up in LA. Potentially some local live stuff happening, which is really cool, and I'm really excited about it because it's been a long time. So yeah, really, really stoked to play some of these songs in real life.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And if it's not on a Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, or Sunday night, I might be able to come to it. I keep seeing Susie True keeps playing shows that are like the nights that I'm working.
Yeah,
I really want to see them.
Yeah, I saw them actually the other night, and it was incredible. It was like, I mean, I've been like such a fan from afar for a really long time. I think like everything about Susie True is like so cool, aesthetically, musically, like everything about them is like so incredibly sick. And we like talk online, but have never met in real life until the other night, and it was chef's kiss. We ripped it up. It was amazing. It like looked amazing. It was just the vibes were immaculate. So pretty stoked about it.
Hopefully in the future we'll all have the chance to see Cowboy Boy live. Not sure how that'll work, but who knows? Something cool.
Definitely fingers crossed. I mean, the only thing that I want to do right now is go on tour. I want to like I want to make sure that it's, I mean, I don't know. It's so difficult, right? Because anybody who's going on tour right now, I'm like, all the power to you, and shouts out. And I'm so glad that you're doing that. Me sort of being reticent to go on tour right now has nothing to do with, I think it's dope that people are. I just like, I mean, it's just hard, right? It's just hard to plan a tour right now. It's hard to, to know what the right thing to do is when everything is like just like a giant question mark. So hopefully it happens soon. Hopefully Mike and I both kind of like feel, good about doing it soon. But we'll see what happens, and like try to stay safe until then, right? That's all we can do right now. Everybody get vaccinated. Everybody get vaccinated. Just do it. Just do it.
Yeah.
Just mandate it. And you know what? Like, even in those states where it's like the governors are psychopaths and they're like, no vaccine mandates, like, do it anyway. Is the state going to sue your tiny little DIY show? Just like, do it. You're already breaking the rules by having a house full of people. It's extremely unsafe to do that, regardless of a pandemic.
Yeah,
If
literally.
it catches on fire, you're all doomed. Just check Vax cards. It's fine.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like I've seen a lot of like venues, whether that's, you know, sort of like larger venues or DIY venues mandating vaccines, and frankly, you know, I have no hesitation in saying that that is the only way that I feel comfortable in any sort of public situation right now. Like I don't think I could play a show. I don't think I could attend a show if it wasn't, you know, mandated for everybody to be vaccinated. I feel like I lose followers on social every time I say anything about being vaccinated or getting vaccinated, which is wild because I don't know, maybe those two things aren't related, but I like kind of feel like they are, because it's usually when I post something about vaccines where I lose followers. But I just have no hesitation in saying, you know, get vaxxed if you can, because it's the only way out, or out, you know, quote unquote out as we can be.
Yeah. I went to that DC show that it was Baccae, Oceanator, and Bad Moves, and like it was a stacked lineup. I was like, I really want to see this show. The DC had a mask mandate for indoors, so like that was there, and then the show was requiring vaccine cards. I'm like, or like a negative test within so many hours.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So like I felt 100% safe. Like every single person in there kept their mask on. Like I saw one or two people take them down to drink and then like put them back up. So
totally.
It's doable.
Yeah, it is. It's totally doable, and I think it's all about, you know, how much you give a shit about other people, frankly. You know, I think that, you know, obviously this is not the pandemic vaccine podcast, but, you know, while we're on the subject, like, you know, it's all about just giving a shit and caring about the lives of other people, and, you know, about people who can't get vaccinated, aka literally every person under 12. You know what I mean? Like, it's just about keeping people fucking safe, and it's not that hard to do. You know, it's not that hard to sort of just like lean into your personal responsibility and just do everything that you can. And it's, you know, pretty mind-boggling to see how many people, I guess, kind of like don't feel that way for whatever reason. And yeah, it's a real bummer. But, you know, it is like, you know, kind of like you said, like, anytime that I've ever been in a situation where, you know, everybody is being really conscientious, and, you know, it does sort of like restore some of that faith that I think, you know, I hope that more people care than don't care. And I think that's true. I think that more people give a shit than don't give a shit.
I think that and I think even the number of people that aren't vaccinated, like probably half of them at least, are just lazy.
Yeah.
Like, and if with enough social pressure, they'll just do it. Like, if they just have no place that they can go, they'll be like, all right, fine, I'll get it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that you're totally right. Like, if nothing else works, I'm hoping that that'll be what does it.
Yeah. I mean, there's even just like I even understand like just being like scared or hesitant in general. Like that I even understand. Like I think you could do some more research, and those people tend to not do much research, or they do their own research and it's
long research.
They do the kind of research that gets them out of having to do the thing that they're scared of. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the percentage of people who are outright going to refuse it no matter what, it's probably within our herd immunity threshold. So like,
100%. Yeah.
So I might cut all that. It depends on how I feel whenever we get to the editing stage. But we have a COVID vent session almost every episode, and I cut a really big one out of the last Paramore episode I did too. So, but
the Paramore, it's the Paramore and vaccine
complex.
Pfizer more. Paramoderna. There's no Johnson & Johnson that works. No.
Like the Johnson & Johnson.
Like the Johnson & Johnson.
Oh, shit.
Our younger brother has the Johnson & Johnson.
Yeah.
For his ears at that part.
Yeah.
It's fine. I have Pfizer, and that's the one that's like less effective than Moderna. I was like, damn it.
It keeps dropping effectiveness.
Yeah.
Oh no, I didn't know that. Is
It's
that
like the
development?
it's like the one that's like you definitely need to get a booster,
Yeah.
and they won't approve boosters for people. They're just doing the same. I think they're doing the same kind of like staggered rollout. I think they're giving boosters to people who are like over 75. But
Got you. Well,
Yeah. Can we ask for the Moderna? Like, can we just be like, hey, can I get a booster with Moderna, not Pfizer?
get the Dolly Parton one, please.
You know, she puts her name on it. It's usually pretty good.
Yeah.
I had a customer with a Dollywood hat today,
Yeah.
like a vintage like 80s trucker hat, Dollywood hat.
That's sick. Love that.
Definitely a cool one.
We keep finding out cool stuff about her.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
She like opened up that business in like a predominantly like black part of Nashville or somewhere. It was like some like publishing business like in the like early 90s and didn't tell anyone for like 20 years. She'd opened it.
So sick. Yeah, we love Dolly. We stan, as the kids say.
Well, cool. Well, we can get into the rest of the show. So, this is the show where we assign our guests a year and they choose one punk, hardcore, emo, or punk adjacent album from that year. And before we get to the album you chose, we assigned you the year 2013, 2013. Not sure how we say that anymore. We're not in that year anymore. But what are some albums that came out that year that were either a big deal or you considered talking about on the show?
That is a good question. I feel like I'm gonna take a little bit of a left turn on this. I hope that's okay. I'm gonna take you back in the way back machine, all the way back to 2013. Life was simple. What were we doing in 2013? I was in college. I was going to DIY shows. I was I don't know, being really cold, waiting for buses to go to basement shows. A couple albums that, okay, no. You know what we're going to do? We're just going to jump right into it. So instead of talking about other album choices that made my short list, I actually want to talk about two other albums that came out in 2013 that are contextually relevant to the album I chose to talk about today and why I wanted to talk about it.
Awesome.
So I'm going to dive right in.
Yeah.
So, the mid to late 2000s produced a lot of really like dope pop emo bands. And I think it was also kind of like the height of popularity for a lot of those bands as well. Like something that really sticks out in my mind as like something that really kind of like cemented for me that these bands weren't just a big deal to me. They were like a big deal to everybody. Is like Gerard Way and Pete Wentz were like on the cover of like Teen Beat magazine. And I just remember thinking like, oh man, like that spot's usually reserved for Zac Efron. Like, whoa, this is a big deal. This is like mainstream. So all of a sudden, towards kind of like the end of the decade, all of these bands like kind of simultaneously went on these really long hiatuses. So like My Chemical Romance, obviously, like Fall Out Boy, Panic at the Disco to a lesser degree, but Paramore too, are all examples of bands that kind of did this. And then all of a sudden, in sort of weirdly, like maybe like 2011 to 2013, all of these bands announced sort of like comebacks and comeback records. And for me, at the time, it sparked a lot of discussion with my friends about sort of like what the kind of like grown-up versions of these bands were going to sound like and how they were going to sort of like age with their fans. I think the general consensus was that there are sort of two camps, right? Like you can either completely reinvent yourself and your sound, which is doable, but could potentially result in kind of like the alienation of your whole fan base, you know, if you stray too far from the stuff that people want to hear from your band. Or you can keep making the same record over and over to appeal to the same demographic. That's sort of like, you know, kind of like perpetual child, like Blink-182 fart joke kind of way. And like, I love Blink-182, don't get me wrong, but like, you know, it ultimately kind of does the same thing in the sense that if you're like 35 and you're still singing about, you know, cutting class in high school and making poop jokes, like it just starts to come off as disingenuous. So you've kind of alienated your original fan base anyway. The secret sauce, in the opinion of me and my friends, was sort of like the ability of a band to kind of like sit in the middle of the Venn diagram of like changing just enough to grow with your audience and thereby sort of tell them we trust you. We know you're smart. We think we think you're smart enough to sort of like get this and like follow us on this, and like staying authentic enough that it doesn't feel like it's some like abandonment of artistry in favor of some like massive, commercial pivot. Not that there's anything wrong with, profiting off of your hard work. Like obviously, get your money. But I think, fans are a lot smarter than people, maybe specifically labels, give them credit for. And it can be hard to connect to something that feels like it was kind of like conceived of around a boardroom table or something. So with that, I want to talk about a couple of other albums that came out in 2013, and then we'll get to the album I chose to talk about and kind of why I'm bringing up these other records. So first record I want to talk about is Fall Out Boy's Save Rock and Roll, which came out in 2013. So prior to this record's release, Fall Out Boy had been on an indefinite hiatus that started in 2009 after the band kind of like fell apart sort of like musically and also personally when they toured Folie à Deux, which I want to say came out in 2009 maybe. So I want to preface all this with the fact that I like unconditionally love Fall Out Boy, and I like always will, to the point where like I one time basically like ran up on Pete Wentz while he was like putting his gym bag into the trunk of his Tesla and was like, I love Fall Out Boy so much. I probably would have tased me, but instead he was like super nice to me. It was like complimented me on my nails. I had these like really long, like bright yellow, like acrylic nails, and he was like, hey, by the way, he talked to me for like 5 minutes, very sweet. And then as I was walking away, he was like, hey, and I was like, yes, Pete Wentz. And he was like, I like your nails. And I was like, oh, thanks so much, and turned around and was like, oh my god. Went back into I was like on a break from work, like went back into my work, like full body shaking. I was like, guys, you'll never believe who I just ran up to in the parking lot. So when I say that my loyalty to Fall Out Boy could not be any stronger, I genuinely mean it. We love them. So, I also want to say too, it's clear that like post 2009, Fall Out Boy like felt really bogged down, I think, by, the label of being like a mid 2000s emo band and like what that kind of like entailed career wise. And, from what I understand, the story kind of goes that they'd get like booed on tour when they'd try to play songs from Folie à Deux instead of songs from like the previous 3 albums. And I know that Patrick Stump was like really sick of being like the front person of an emo band, like really kind of like hated that label, hated that concept, and went on to record a soul album that just like absolutely bombed because everybody wanted to hear Sugar We're Going Down, and like I can imagine that would bring just like a huge sense of, disillusionment, and also a hunger to completely change your sound as a band. So, I get it. That said, when Fall Out Boy announced their return and eventually released Save Rock and Roll, they came back as a band that was, at least to me, almost completely unrecognizable. It doesn't really feel like the record has too much of a through line, and as somebody who grew up listening to Take This to Your Grave and From Under the Cork Tree like literally thousands of times, I don't really know who Fall Out Boy made Save Rock and Roll for, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like that album kind of like ushered in this like weird era of like Imagine Dragons core kind of like rock music where it feels kind of like genreless, and it always leads me to wonder like, who is this for? Like, and the only answer I can ever come up with is like people who like go to sports games at stadiums. That's the only people that music is made for. The album just feels kind of like rudderless to me, and the artist features on it feel really kind of like frenetic too. Like, I think there's like a Big Sean feature. There's like a Courtney Love feature, Elton John. Like it reads like a Kanye West track list, but like just doesn't live up to that level of like, do you know what I'm saying? Like it just doesn't feel cohesive. It doesn't feel curated in the same way that, Kanye can make a song with Elton John and Rihanna and, John Legend and whoever else on the same, Bon Iver, like on the same track, and I get it, but I just feel like this was not the same sort of like backbone, I guess, wasn't there in this situation for me. I just feel like I can't really like find the soul of this album. So, yeah. I also want to briefly touch on a second album, which is Too Weird to Live, Too Rare to Die by Panic! At the Disco, which also came out in 2013. Want to be clear that I think Brendan Urie has done some kind of like problematic stuff. So in talking about this album, don't want it to come off like an endorsement of him or of any of that. But I do want to talk about this album because I feel like it perfectly illustrates my point. I feel like the first kind of like 3 or 4 Panic albums are like a bunch of giant nerds in like top hats writing songs like they live inside the Moulin Rouge or something, which like as a 15-year-old emo kid, you know, who was also like a giant nerd who loved musical theater, like obviously this band, you know, had a lot of appeal for me. They made A Fever You Can't Sweat Out, which is, I mean, obviously just like the most nerdy like theatrical album ever, and I just like ate that shit up as a kid. And you know, then they made Pretty Odd, which feels like kind of this like really reverent kind of like Beatles, like late era Beatles like tribute record almost, and I like ate that shit up too. And you know, Vices and Virtues, which felt a little more grown up and sort of in the same vein as the other stuff, except it like wasn't about people in overcoats and ball gowns and like a haunted fucking hospital or whatever the first record was about. And then, you know, this record comes out, and it's just like a full-fledged, like super polished pop album all packaged up and, you know, ready to get hundreds of millions of plays on Spotify and be the soundtrack to like an ESPN commercial or something. And, you know, again, I don't want to say that I don't think that there's anything wrong with a band or artist in any genre really, you know, making something that is like really pop oriented or palatable on a larger scale or anything like that. I mean, like, obviously, like, I am obsessed with pop music. I literally make pop music, so this is not an indictment of pop music whatsoever. But, you know, honestly, I don't even really think that it's like a bad album per se. Like, this is not me being like, this album sucks. I just don't even see like even like the ghost of the same band that made A Fever You Can't Sweat Out here at all, you know. I can't speak really for the band's, you know, fan base at large, but it just seems to me like such a strange move to sort of just abandon every last vestige of your vibe as a band, you know, and in the process kind of like make it clear to those fans like, we actually don't care whether or not you like us, we just want to make the theme song for an NHL team now. You know? Like, I don't necessarily think that was like a conscious decision on their part, but I do feel like in a way, I don't know, it just feels like a bummer, you know, it feels like a bummer. So that's kind of how those two albums made me feel. I'm just kind of bummed.
Do you want to know what the commonality on these two records is?
Yeah, I would love to. I think I know what you're going to say.
They're both produced by Butch Walker.
Yeah.
Yes, and I deliberately didn't say anything because he is so fucking nice. He is such a nice person, and I think he's so good at what he does, and like, I know that he will never listen to this, and I know that he will never connect me to the person who occasionally emails him from my work email, but like, shouts out to you, Butch Walker. This is not an indictment of your ability as a producer, but like, damn, bro.
Butch Walker also did Red by Taylor Swift. Also did, I think I knew this, but I forgot it. He did Painkillers by Brian Fallon, which is a great record. So, I mean, maybe has to do more with what the artist is doing, but
yeah.
You do look though around the time period, like the 2013 time period. I mean, he did a Lit record the year before.
Yeah.
What? There's a Lit record in 2012?
He did the Train record from 2012 and the record from 2014. Very exemplary of what he does with this kind of rock band, pop-oriented rock, I guess.
Totally. And, you know, I think you make a very good point. I think it does have a lot to do with sort of like what the artist is doing, because we as an audience, you know, we know what Butch Walker does with, you know, pop-oriented rock, like you said. And, you know, I believe that, I mean, clearly, like, I cannot argue with, like, 200 million plays on Spotify. Like, clearly, the problem does not lie with the band. It clearly lies with me for, like, not being into it. You know what I'm saying? That being said, as somebody who, you know, grew up on this, like, weird, nerdy top hat rock, like, it doesn't make any sense for me to hear, if you love me, let me go. Like, it's not the same band. You know what I'm saying? It's not. So, I don't know. I again, like, definitely not an indictment of Butch Walker specifically. I think, Fall Out Boy and Panic at the Disco knew exactly what they were getting into bed with somebody who makes, makes a very signature style of sort of like pop-oriented rock.
I think that's they were going for that. Like,
Exactly.
it does very much seem like that's what they were doing.
They were probably like, get me the Butch Walker sound,
Yeah.
like that.
Get Butch on the phone.
Yeah, I mean, that's totally what it was. And it's the same label, too, so it's probably he was like, the Fueled by Ramen execs were like, hey, we got another one for you if you want to come in here.
Totally. Yeah.
He's like, 2 for 1? All right.
In that Fall Out Boy money, baby. Let's go.
It made money. I mean, it worked.
For sure.
Right.
It definitely did. Yeah, and it's so interesting, right, for me to sit here and be like, like, I miss old Fall Out Boy. But, like, they're, like, international superstars now, which was not the case with those other records. Like, who am I to begrudge these bands doing exactly what every band ideally would want to do? And, and that's sick. That's sick for them. But what I'm saying is, y'all don't sound like the same band anymore. And if that's what you want, cool. That's fine. I'll stick to listening to Sugar We're Going Down 1,000 more times, It's just, it just, to me, it really illustrates, sort of what I was saying. Like, there are 2 very distinct ways that you can go. And what I am looking for is the band who sits squarely in the middle of that Venn diagram of, growing with your fans and, making a piece of art that feels like a piece of art.
Yeah, well, I think we know what you're talking about.
I was gonna
So,
yeah.
that is the self-titled album Paramore by Paramore.
I don't mind letting you down easy, but just give it time. If it don't hurt now, but just wait a while. Another big fish in the pond, no more. You were worth the feeding on. So what are you gonna do when the world don't orbit around you? So what are you gonna do when the world don't orbit around you? Ain't it fun living in the real world? Ain't it good being all alone? Where you from? You might be the
Yeah,
one.
I got some stats on this record. I'll run through real quick. It was released April 5th, 2013 on Fueled by Ramen Records, same label. And
Hell
it's very
yeah.
important, I think, to note that too. So
Yeah.
we'll keep that there. This is their 4th full-length album and the follow-up to Brand New Eyes. The personnel on this album is Haley Williams on vocals and keys, Jeremy Davis on bass, Taylor York on guitar and keys, and ukulele.
Cute.
That's pretty prominent.
Yeah.
They brought in, I think it's Ilan Rubin. He is the drummer from Nine Inch Nails, Angels and Airwaves, and Lost Prophets. Ooh,
Yikes.
yikes! Yeah, for sure. He had nothing to do with it.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah.
They brought him in to play drums on this record because they had fired Josh Farrow and Zach Farrow in 2010, and weirdly, they went 3 years without finding a new drummer to stay in the band. But weird. I found a really interesting little tidbit though about Ilan Rubin. He learned to play drums when he was 8, but he also took lessons from Travis Barker.
Oh shit, that's so cool.
And he was the youngest person to perform at Woodstock 99.
Huh.
Oh, how old was he? Do you know?
19?
Whoa.
He was
Damn.
in a band
Who was he in?
called FON, I think is what
Oh.
it was. Yeah, I'd never heard of that band before. They were one of like the side stage bands.
Yeah, wow, that is wild.
One of the bands that Moby would have been complaining about.
Yeah. His name not being between on the piece of wood.
I can't believe they forgot me.
The album was produced by Justin Meldal Johnson, who around this time period had worked with M83 and Neon Trees, and I think that's very apparent with the way this record sounds, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. So those I got a couple more stats later I'll talk about, but first thing I usually like to ask is what made you choose this album specifically to talk about?
That is a very good question. I mean, honestly, first of all, it feels like a very natural album for me to pick. Like, it feels like it's just this big, gigantic power pop album, right? So, I mean, me being in the band that I'm in, you know, me making the music that I make, it feels natural. But also, you know, hearkening back to what I was saying, this record to me is the secret sauce. This record grows with Paramore as a band, grows with their fans, and also, you know, I think there's something very sort of like deliberate about a band that's like, we're gonna record a record and it's gonna be our fourth record and it's gonna be self-titled. It's you know, a very sort of like signpost that this band is reinventing themselves, right? And especially, you know, with the departure of two, you know, founding members of the band, like, it seems like the perfect. And I mean, obviously, I think we all know that was not an amicable split. So, you know, it seems like the perfect time to sort of reinvent, but in a very different way than the previous two bands that we were talking about. Yeah, I think also, you know, we were kind of talking about how the like mid 2000s to sort of like the end of the 2000s was kind of like the heyday of all of these sort of like pop emo bands. And I think this record sort of like perfectly ushers out that era and ushers in this new era of Paramore being this like, you know, kind of like quasi new wave sort of like pop oriented, power pop oriented band that feels really mature. So that's why I chose it.
Regular listeners of the show will notice that I just recently spoke about Paramore. We talked about Riot. That was with our good friend Adam Yo, and our guest that episode was Angie from Resonating Zine. Really fun episode, iconic record, super well known. And so when you actually picked this record before she picked that one, because it was just the way the scheduling worked out.
Yeah, nice.
And so I told her, I was like, well, we've got the self-titled coming up a few weeks after, and she was like, that's cool. And she still wanted to keep the Riot record. I was like, I understand. That's a massive record, triple platinum album. I mean, it sold plenty of copies.
Yeah.
And so when she chose it, I messaged you and I was like, just so you know, someone else chose another record and you decided to keep this one too. So I have now recorded 2 episodes about Paramore within the same month span. So a lot of people know my relationship with the band. If you listen to the Riot episode, I highly recommend everyone go check that out. I don't want to repeat myself for the people who are listening to both. But Dylan, we didn't get your take because you weren't there for that episode.
I was out. I was moving. Are you asking me about Paramore in general?
Yeah. What were your general Paramore feelings before you listened to this record? Get ready for this episode.
Yeah. I mean, Paramore is a band that is kind of inescapable if you came into punk at the age that I did. I remember the singles from Riot. I remember watching the music videos on Fuse. I would say that Paramore is a band that I've never been into. I've never listened to a full album of theirs until this one, but I've always been an appreciator of their singles. I've always thought that they were a fine pop punk band. I know Hayley Williams is a great vocalist. Like, technically speaking, she's an amazing vocalist, and I've always appreciated that about her. And I think that she has a really unique voice in rock music in general. Really one of the only people I feel like from the mid 2000s emo scene that will really go down in history as like an incredible vocalist, an incredible, like, because I think that Patrick from Fall Out Boy specifically has a unique voice that stands out, but I don't think that he's done anything that's truly as indispensable. And I think a lot of the other artists in that same scene, like, I think My Chemical Romance is probably like the only other band that is just like, those records are gonna live forever. Yeah. But I think that you can separate Haley from Paramore.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I don't think that you can separate Gerard from My Chemical Romance. I don't think that you can separate Patrick from Fall Out Boy. Like, they're always going to be associated with those bands and those scenes. So, yeah, I was aware of the singles from this record when they came out. I was like, oh, yeah, this is their pop turn. That makes sense. I thought they were fine when they came out. Like, I wasn't like, they didn't compel me to listen to the band any further. But I was like, these don't bother me when I hear them. They're kind of catchy. Makes sense. It's a natural progression for the band. Kind of like you're saying, it sits right in between what I knew of them before and where they were going.
Yeah.
Like, it made sense to me. Whereas similarly with Fall Out Boy and Panic at the Disco, hearing those when those came out, I was like, whoa, they're going for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was like,
they are certainly going for it.
really obvious. It was just like, this is our comeback. We're like leaving all of that behind. We're new frontier. We're like mainstream pop rock.
Yeah.
Paramore, to me, it seemed pretty clear that they were like, and I guess I was more aware of how Paramore had continued to stay sort of active. I mean, not super active, but they seemed more active to me than a lot of the other bands that were kind of coming back. So, yeah, I mean, I guess that's like my big picture without like getting into this record, like what my thoughts are of Paramore and Haley especially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Olivia, what re-listening to the album for this episode, how recently had you last heard it?
Oh, I mean, I would say outside of maybe like singles, probably within the like 2-year range of it coming out. So I mean, it's interesting because I actually like in that sort of like canon of bands, Paramore was never like my like top all-time favorite, pop punk, pop emo band either. But I do remember this album making a huge impression on me for the reasons that we're discussing, because by that point, like I was already I was in college, I was making my own music, I was in, my own bands, and, that like seeing what they had done and sort of like maturing in this, really kind of like objectively noticeable way was like really interesting, and it piqued my interest at the time. So I was really excited when y'all gave me 2013 because I was like, oh, this is perfect. Like this makes perfect sense.
How did you feel coming back to it? Like, how does it hold up now for you?
It like definitely holds up, which is awesome. I feel like almost like things that like didn't hit me, back in whatever, like 2013 to 2015, the era that I would have probably been bumping this the most, like things that didn't hit me or that I didn't quite understand then, I can sort of like view with like a more objective kind of like musical lens and be like, oh no, this is actually really sick, and like I get this, and I get how this sort of like, I get it, I get the big picture. And I think this album is cool because like there is a big picture where like you take, a record like Save Rock and Roll, and I don't necessarily know, I mean, I can't speak for Fall Out Boy, but I don't necessarily know that there's the same level of sort of like big pictureness to that record that there is to the Paramore self-titled,
Yeah.
Don't try to take this from me. Don't try to take this from me now. Don't try to take this from me. Don't try to take this from me now. Feels like I'm waking from the dead, and everyone's been waiting on me. At least now I never have to wonder what it's like to sleep a year away. But weren't we indestructible? I thought that we could brave it all.
Riot extensively in order to do the show. Coming to this album, which is one I'd never listened to before, but I was aware of it. It's funny because I think on my own I'd listened to the most recent album that was a 2015 record.
Mm-hmm.
I'd listened to that one, enjoyed it quite a bit. So I knew that they went in like a more traditionally pop direction, but still kind of maintained like the elements that made them who they are. And I was very familiar with Riot and the record before Riot. I've never listened to Brand New Eyes, so I guess I need to remedy that. That's the only one I haven't heard now. And so listening to this, I was like, okay, this is like the transition from emo, sort of. There was an odd, not fully emo band too, anyway. To full blown pop band.
Mm-hmm.
So like this record was like, all right, let's hear what it is. And it's very obviously a transitionary record because of like lineup changes. Like this is the last record with the bassist, Jeremy Davis.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I read was like, yeah, this is his final record before he leaves the band. I was like, well, technically he got kicked out of the band during the Riot recording sessions, so he doesn't play bass on the album, but he comes back to do backing vocals. But whatever, he's on the record.
Wild.
And to this day, Taylor York is like the only other member besides Haley that's been on every single record.
Yeah.
So after this, Zach gets to come back to the band to play drums. Josh, I don't think Josh gets to come back, but probably for his actions during that 2010 blog post there. But
oh man, yeah.
So listening to this, I was like, okay, I think I like Riot better, and I think I like the new record better than this one. So this one, I listened to it, I'm like, it's a good record. It's a little long.
Really long. Yeah.
It's like over an hour.
Yeah. Just over. It's like an hour and 3 minutes or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it closes out in like a 7-minute track that does that thing where it like fades out and fades back in.
Kind of a wild choice, right? To end the record. It's like 8-minute like post-rock shoegaze jam.
Mm-hmm.
Like, especially considering the rest of the record that kind of, it feels pretty like all killer, no filler to me for the most part. Like, I feel like all of the songs are pretty like, they're pretty lean. So just throwing in this last track seems like a bold choice to me. But sorry, continue.
No, I agree, because that was when I was just like, I'm ready for the album to be finished now. Why is it not finished? But they put it at the end, so you don't have to listen to it. There's nothing after it. So
true.
Overall, I think a majority of these songs are really good. There's maybe some length issues on some of these songs, but like other than that, the chorus is like all hit, like almost every song. So
yeah.
There's definitely something. They're definitely working through something and going through something too throughout the record. The interludes kind of like hinted that bigger theme throughout the album.
Yeah.
But overall, it's a really good like pop record from former punk emos. So Dylan, how do you feel about this album? As this is your first full Paramore experience, right?
Yeah. It's a weird record to be like, well, I'm gonna start with the pop record. Like and I mean, it's not, I don't think that it's fair to necessarily call it a pop record. I think it is mostly a rock record. If you want to, I mean, I don't know, if you want to parse genre terminology, the big singles are definitely like pop songs, and I would call those pop songs. I would say this record's maybe like, but I feel like the album cuts, with the exceptions of the interludes, are mostly just like rock, straightforward rock music. Which it is interesting to hear a straightforward rock record in 2013, like something that I would just call it rock and not qualify it with subgenres of rock. Like I wouldn't necessarily call it a punk record. There are songs that I would classify as punk songs. There are songs I would classify as emo songs. There are songs that I, like The Closer, that you would call post-rock. So like it kind of dabbles in a lot of different things, but kind of unifies them all within the sound of the band, which is cool. I really appreciate that they weave some different influences into one sound. But yeah, it's interesting to me to hear a rock record that isn't the rock records that we talked about that were coming out at this time.
Right.
That stands up to time. This doesn't sound like 2013 rock music that you would hear on the radio. This doesn't sound like what they were necessarily doing before, but you can tell where they came from.
Mm-hmm.
This is a record that you can listen to and be like, okay, like I can see the lineage of like what influenced them before, like, and where they're taking those now.
Mm-hmm.
I would say my biggest problems with their record, I think it's just like sequencing and length. I mean, kind of what we've talked about.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that the interludes add anything to the record. I think that they were an odd choice that I understand because they seem to be communicating maybe the universal thread of the record of what was going on around the band at that time. But ultimately, the way that they're treated detracts from what they had to say. They just sound like demos of songs that they decided weren't good enough to turn into full songs.
Interesting.
And I don't mind listening to demos when they're interesting, but these don't interest me other than the lyrics, which again, I think was the point, was they were trying to put the lyrics first, but it feels really haphazard when it's kind of jammed between these like less personal sounding kind of like rock bangers. Like,
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I think like this is maybe like kind of a weird comparison, but like, okay, so like when you go see an opera, there's like a couple different types of songs, I guess. So like when you go see an opera, someone sings an aria, for example. An aria is all about just like singing your ass off. It's supposed to sound beautiful. There's very little kind of like lyrical content. You're supposed to just, it's all about just singing it up. But for the life of me, I cannot remember like what kind of song, like what the type of song is called. But there's these songs that occur directly before an aria usually, that is more about sort of like talk singing and like advancing the plot. Like there's like more content in these like little sort of like less singy, less showy songs that sort of like lead you into the aria, so then the aria doesn't need content. And not to say that these songs like post interlude don't have content of their own, but in some way I do sort of understand. I agree. I think that placement and arrangement is like, definitely an issue with bringing the vibe down and then trying to bring the vibe back up. But like something like the interlude, the moving on interlude into Ain't It Fun, like to me that is like exactly that structure. It's like, here's what the song's about, here's the song, so that I kind of get.
You just brought something to my mind. Have either of you listened to the new Anika Pyle record that came out this year?
I haven't yet.
Excellent record. It's a very deeply personal record. And throughout the album, she has these like, I don't know if they're voicemails or if they're just like recordings, but they're like these spoken parts that are kind of advancing. It's doing the same thing there. They're like kind of advancing the story of the album. It's her life. It's really what it is. But so yeah, it brought to my mind that record, which even Haley's solo records have a little bit of that going on too. The two solo records she's done. Dylan, I did want to jump back to what you said about how this doesn't sound like something that came out in 2013. I actually disagree. I think this sounds like, when I say that the producer is kind of the element that I'm referring to specifically. So he did records by M83 and what was the other one I said? Looking at my notes here. Neon Trees. Neon Trees especially was the one that I was thinking of, because there was like a song around this time period by Neon Trees that was pretty big, I think. It may have been right before or right after, I'm not entirely sure, but
was it like the big Neon Trees song, or what's it?
Yeah, the one with the clap. like the
Yeah. I forgot about that song, and I forgot that you said Neon Trees, but that definitely makes sense, especially when you compare the singles.
Yeah. So, and then there's a little bit of this like Muse type vibe, not like the out there Muse elements. This is more like a straight ahead version of that tone, that sound that you hear, which I think if you look at the Twilight soundtracks from around this time period, you're gonna see more artists that kind of fit in this lane of what this record is. It, not to be super duper topical and talk about aging news at this point, but that Pitchfork article about that emo band's record that got negative reviews, that's the Foxing Pitchfork review.
Mm-hmm.
There was a line in it that compared it to like the early 2010s festival rock sound, and I was like,
So rock.
like the Passion Pit sort of like that thing. And I was like, I worked at a Barnes and Noble during this time period, so like I was hearing all of these like type of records.
Only thing you heard. Oh.
Between like a Bon Iver style, Grizzly Bear, Fleet Foxes, yes, the band. I got Foxing on Fleet Foxes in my head. The other kind of sound was like the big glossy rock, like
okay. I guess I think of that sound as spanning a larger period of time. But no, that makes sense. I guess I can walk that back a little bit. But I guess it's, to me, I'm hearing in what Paramore does on this record, especially like the album cuts, less so than the singles. Like I hear them drawing from what would have been Muse's contemporaries prior to them blowing up, or like, I guess it feels less like they fit in with Passion Pit and more like, okay, this is someone who grew up on Radiohead and grew up on is a fan of, still listens to Sunny Day Real Estate, and like has probably listened to some Cave-In records, or it's easier for me to tie this into the progression of like alternative rock from the 90s into the 2000s than the super slick stuff that like kind of just, but maybe that's just association. Like I know this about Paramore. Like I know what her influences are. I knew what her influences were prior to, I knew she was making Refused references.
Yeah.
When they first showed up. So maybe that plays into it more. But I see what you mean. Yeah.
They do borrow a lot from like new wave and like some of that kind of stuff. Like they specifically mention, or Haley specifically mentioned, Blondie and Susie and the Banshees being influences on this album.
Yeah, totally.
I hear the Cars.
Yeah,
too.
for sure. I kind of view this record as like a proto, well, not proto new wave in the sense that it's actually but you know what I mean, like a very new wave influenced record. And I was actually, having that thought sort of like in 2013 and not really thinking beyond that or researching beyond that when I was researching for recording this, I, you know, came upon the same must have been the same quote that you found about, you know, Blondie, and being like, oh man, like that's cool that's like, you know, that I you know, that my instincts were correct listening to this in 2013 and being like, huh, kind of sounds like Blondie, you know. Yeah.
It's interesting to me because I don't get Big Blondie singles influence. I get album cut Blondie influence.
Yeah, I hear that.
Yeah.
I hear like Fade Away and Radiate. Like I hear, yeah.
There was one song specifically that I was like, there it is. Still Into You. It has like towards the end of that one, like I really hear that Blondie influence. I guess it's like the way they choose to use synths in this record, because it's not like just straight ahead, just like holding keys, you know, like doing that kind of thing. Like they choose to do more like percussive sounding synths, which they would continue to do with the newest Paramore album too. Like there's a lot of that kind of stuff on there.
Yeah, totally. I have so much stuff in my notes about sort of just like the use of synths on this record and how I think it's so cool and very, I mean, very, very deliberate, right? There's a lot of like everything is kind of in its right place. Like when we sort of take away the concept of like, you know, maybe we would have ordered the songs differently, or maybe we would have, you know, nixed the interludes, or, you know, made some of the songs shorter. Like I think that everything is very sort of like deliberately chosen. I think there's a lot of sort of like attention to detail sonically that I like feel really excited about. And I think that there are a lot of like specifically synth moments on this record that I'm like, yes, on everything to sound like all the time. So I think it's very cool. Specifically, let me see. There's one track where I was like, this is the best synth moment on this record. Oh, it's Proof. It's in like the second verse of Proof. There's like a really dope synth moment, and I was like, wow, this is really sort of like the dark horse of this song. Like this really kind of like carries the song. I mean, the song itself is actually, you know, really sick and really, really fucking like direct and, you know, incredible. Yeah. And that song feels specifically very sort of like urgent and kind of like deliberate and like lean and just sort of like perfect. Everything has its moment. Everything is in its right place.
They do these things on the album too, where like you'll be listening to the song and you'll hear just like this little synth part on the second verse that doesn't show up again in the rest of the song. It's just like you just threw that little like flourish in there.
Yep. Oh my God. And that is the stuff that gets me going. You know, that is my shit. So there are so many like little kind of like special moments on this record that I was like, wow, you know, after not having visited something in, you know, a number of years and sort of going back to it after having recorded a record that has its own sort of like special little synth moments, it was like a really cool experience to be like, oh shit, this is sick.
They do these just like really, like each song doesn't even use the same type of synths. Like there's like the more like some songs have like the thing that like churches would go do later, and then like Ain't It Fun has this like Prince style synth line where she's just like just hanging on to it. I'm not sure who played specifically on that song, but like it's just like a low synth sound that you don't hear the rest of the record.
Sick. And that's the thing, right? Everything feels very like the attention to detail is very much there. It's very like, and everything is like so textured, and it makes everything like fucking huge, which to me makes it feel more like a pop record, right? Like the production is like so incredibly polished. Everything is just like so massive, and yeah, it feels very grown up, and it's very like it's I love stuff where you can like listen to it a million zillion times, but every time you go back, you're picking out some new texture or some new, you know what I mean? It's sort of like no two listens are ever like 100% the same, and that's kind of the vibe that I've been getting from this record, sort of revisiting it. So it's been cool.
Yeah, it's dense. It's dense for what is ultimately a pop record.
Yeah.
Like there's enough to keep you coming back. I mean, I would, yeah, if I were to re-listen to it, I would probably be more judicious in like skipping tracks. I mean, like I said with the interludes, because yeah, well, going back to that, I do want to say like I feel like Ain't It Fun? Like, I feel like there are big pop songs on here that are general and relatable to everyone, but you can also understand what she's saying about the particulars of her life and her experiences. Like Ain't It Fun? You could think of that as just being like kind of like whatever, a sassy rock song that someone, wrote in 2 minutes, but you can weight that with what you know of her life and get what that means to her as an artist and what she's saying. And you can weight it with what you've experienced in your life and relate to it. So it's not without depth, even though it's, ultimately pretty simple lyrically.
For sure.
Plus, we have that hindsight too. Like, she's been pretty open about like her marriage and like that time period she was with, Jordan. So like some of this stuff, you're like, now with like knowing some of the pieces of the story, that you're like, has a different meaning now.
Yeah, or prescribe very like personal meaning to some of the stuff that would otherwise be sort of ambiguous. And I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like that is sort of like something that is very specific to this era and this genre of bands. Like, I just think back to like the amount of just like knowledge like bonking around in my brain about a band like My Chemical Romance, for example. Like, I feel like as like a whatever, like 13, 14, 15-year-old, I could have told you any tiny minuscule fact about this band and their, whatever, their lives. And I don't really know that that's the case for any other like genre of band, or like, do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like Paramore specifically, like being in that sort of like era, everyone was like you got like so into the bands that you loved that you knew everything about their like marriage troubles too, and ascribe that meaning to their music.
I mean, I think that kind of goes back to, at least to grunge, because I feel like people knew lots of very personal details about like Kurt Cobain, and I think that goes back to maybe like that era of confessional kind of rock songwriting. And it's hard to say because I wasn't alive, prior to 1990, so like I don't know what the general public knew about like the details of like most rock stars' lives.
True.
I mean, we know tons of things about most classic rock artists now because they've written memoirs and
yeah,
had autobiographies. So, and biographies written about them. So I don't know. I guess.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Maybe it's not genre specific, because I think even too, like, bands like, I don't know, like One Direction or something. Like, I imagine that people who are like really big One Direction fans probably know everything about every member of that band, or group.
I guess the difference with those kinds of artists, and maybe more so pop artists in general, it's more controlled.
Yeah.
It's more manicured.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely comes across as like, these are the details we want you to know about us.
Right.
Whereas I feel like with maybe like alternative music, it's like we don't have the control. We don't have that kind of like managerial protection of our lives. Like, it's just like, it's all out there and you can find it.
We don't all are controlling our reputations all the time.
I was looking. Nope.
Yeah, I mean, emo definitely has like has been criticized for being like airing too much of their personal lives, personal drama. So I think it is specific to their genre and their scene associations. But yeah. I got a couple other things about the album that are pretty interesting. So it was a commercial and critical success, like very well reviewed in most places. It went platinum. It's certified platinum. It debuted at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100, or Hot 200, excuse me. That's the album chart. Ain't It Fun won a Grammy for Best Rock Song in 2015, which is so long after the fact.
Yeah, that's wild.
Ain't It Fun was the 4th single on the album.
I know. Isn't that like mind-boggling? Especially too, because I feel like I have like a very distinct memory of hearing Ain't It Fun for the first time, and the way that I remember it was that that's how the comeback of Paramore was announced. Like in my head, those two things are linked, but it was the fourth single.
Yeah.
Like totally bizarre to me.
It was Now, Still Into You, Daydreaming, and Ain't It Fun. There's videos for all four of those. There's like two more videos too. There's a video for Ankle Biters, which is like kind of like a little animated thing. And then there's a video for the deluxe edition of Hate to See Your Heart Break with Joy Williams of the Civil Wars doing like guest vocals on that song. Very interesting vocal combo there. Listening to the album, I was like, why would you not put Ain't It Fun first? But I understand maybe like trying to like goose a little bit of those sales on the on the end of the album cycle, so that makes a little sense.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
I did watch all four videos too, and they're just charming. All four of them were really fun. The very first, the Now video has this like dystopian sort of like Hunger Gamesy type thing going on in it. She's got this weird like paint across her like eyes that like makes it look like she doesn't have eyebrows or eyelashes. Very odd.
Yeah, bold choices all around.
But then the Still Into You video is like them playing in like a mansion, like partying in a mansion, just three of them with like just playing. Well, a lot of pastel colors, and Daydreaming is like a story video that's like part concert video. And then the Ain't It Fun video is just adorable. It's them trying to break all these world records, and they're just like silly records, like try and catch as many feathers as you can in 30 seconds. And I didn't look too much into those. Were those real records that they made, or they just for the video's sake?
I'm not sure. I think that's such a great concept, though. Like such a charming, like you said, right? Like so incredibly charming.
It just endeared them even more to me. I was just like, how can anybody not like this band?
Literally.
And it makes those singles more fun, because they're like they are some of the most energetic songs, or the most danceable pop centric songs. But because there are certainly songs on the album that are faster, but they also tend to go in a little bit more aggressive route. Like Ankle Biters is like a punk track.
Totally. Sure. Yeah, I would agree with that 100%.
So the video. Yeah, so they were associated with something called Record Setter. So the whatever records that they were breaking were not like Guinness World Records, but they are records that I guess were tracked by whoever Record Setter is, if that's even a real thing.
I mean, they're silly kind of things, like carrying as many stuffed animals running backwards blindfolded. Like, obviously that's not the Guinness Book of World Records, but
that's so cute.
Because a lot of the records are like 30 seconds. Like one was like 18 feathers. I was just like, oh, these are small records. Like I feel like these can be beaten.
By Paramore specifically.
I looked a little bit into. I looked at what the producer also did. He did Tegan and Sarah's Heartthrob, which was their big.
So much sense. That I thought about Heartthrob a lot actually while I was listening to this record, and while I was kind of like, contemplating this whole concept of like, an alternative band or an indie band kind of like really sort of like committing to making a pop record. And something I really liked about, I think Heartthrob is like, I think it's a really good record. Mm-hmm. It's not my favorite Tegan and Sarah album by any means, but it's, I think it's a good record. They were very transparent, and they were very upfront about being like, we've done a bunch of shit and we want to make a pop record now. We want to like make something that has this sort of like level of, commercial palatability that, that I think we can, accomplish. And it works, and it still feels authentic because there's that sort of ethos behind it of like, yeah, fuck it. We're just going to make a pop record. They're not like, we're still the same Tegan and Sarah that made The Con, but now like they're like, no, we're trying something different. This is something you haven't heard from us, and it's something that it feels like a natural progression, for our career. I think that's really dope. Also, Tegan and Sarah are fellow Calgary, Canada exports, so big love in my heart for them forever.
Oh,
I didn't realize how long it had been between Sainthood and Heartthrob. That was because that came out. Sainthood came out in 2009, which I remember being a record that was maybe not well received.
Sainthood?
Yeah, I feel like there was a little tiny backlash because that one was really poppy. Like it's very synthy and poppy.
Well, it
And
followed
it was
up
definitely
the con.
not the con.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I think the con was just so big for so many people and like a very specific sounding album that they would have had such a hard time following it up with anything. So
Right, unless you kind of like really jump into it with both feet, right? Which I think Heartthrob really did.
mhm.
You know, so it makes sense to me. It makes sense to me that the same band that made So Jealous like also made Heartthrob, but only because they're both so completely what they are. If that, whereas Sainthood, I feel like was kind of like a 1 foot in, 1 foot out. You know, maybe perhaps a more sort of like forgettable Tegan and Sarah record than other Tegan and Sarah records.
Came out the same year as It's Blitz, the also notorious kind of bashed synth pop turn for the Yeah Yeah Yeahs.
Oh,
Interesting.
very interesting.
This producer also worked on the 2 most recent Jimmy Eat World records. I think I listened to both of those, and I don't know. I think the last like 4 Jimmy Eat World records all have like, this is Jimmy Eat World. Like, this is what Jimmy Eat World sounds like. They're gonna sound like that on all the records. So if you like what they've done post Futures, you know, like you get it consistently. But
There's more.
Sorry.
I just said there's more.
Yeah. But my favorite thing is that this producer also did the brand new Deaf Heaven record that is just got announced, or is it out, or like the blue one with the like the blue circle on the cover, which now makes me think this is Deaf Heaven synth pop record.
Yeah. Damn, that is wild.
Well, it's definitely, from what I've heard, it's not. Yeah, there are synthesizers on it. I don't know if he screams on it or not. I guess I should find out.
Is it out yet? I don't know. We can talk about that later. I guess that's unimportant.
We'll talk about it on the Patreon because I will definitely be talking about Death Heaven.
Oh, nice.
This week. So a little
Bather
spoiler.
I'm checking out my notes and I think I've hit everything on here.
Nice.
The only thing I didn't mention, we didn't really talk about, is Fueled by Ramen.
Okay.
You know, because, you know, they got like, when they kicked out the Farrah brothers of Paramore, it also kind of outed Fueled by Ramen as being a seed label, which then I think they announced that they were later. They're like, yes, we are like a straight to the Atlantic like pipeline.
Yeah.
And so I guess at this point they're just like, fuck it, let's just go all in on pop, and that's why like the 3 records they put out are just straight pop records.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
And then it's really cool that they've also signed like now, like Meet Me at the Altar is on Fueled by Ramen.
Yeah, that shit gave me like full body chills when I found out. Like that to me is just like, I mean, Meet Me at the Altar like fucking slaps and like is just everything that a pop punk band, like an alternative band, should be in 2021. And like just thinking about like, you know, even me like being just like a, you know, like a young, you know, non-male person, like, you know, growing up listening to emo and pop punk and being like, holy shit, like, you know, I want to be signed to Fueled by Ramen someday or whatever. Like, it's just, it feels like a really like full circle moment, I think. So I hope that they are like so stoked because, and like so proud because they, I mean, obviously should be.
Yeah. Their new EP is great.
Hell yeah.
I can't wait to see what full length they come up with.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what we can talk about, because this will be the first time that we've talked remotely anything about this. As we're recording this, the news today that Olivia Rodrigo has to include Paramore as writing credits on. What's this song? Good for you.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's so funny. I literally saw that while I was making notes for this and was like, oh shit. I feel I have very complicated feelings about this. And I mean, I'm sure that anybody, I imagine that anybody who makes music or like is a fan, like it's just getting so much more complicated and so much more like, I saw someone who put it sort of like it's become sort of like more forensic, but also like less expert oriented, because the people who are like making the like passing potentially judgment calls, like legal judgment calls, are not necessarily like musicians per se. So like, are we sort of like at the point in time now where like any song that has the same chord progression is now gonna potentially, like, you're gonna potentially have to like give writing credits to whoever, like, you know what I mean? Like, I can understand the sort of like the similarities, the conceptual similarities. Those choruses do sound, you know, relatively familiar or like relatively similar, but like, dude, there's got to be like tens of thousands of songs that have that exact same chord progression. Like, are we going to say that Hayley Williams wrote all of those songs too? Like, and also like, I don't really know how much credence to give this, but I feel like this specific Olivia Rodrigo record has been getting a lot of flack. Like, you know, Taylor Swift is now, you know, credited as having, you know, co-written, I think, 2 of the songs on the album, because everybody was like, oh, it sounds really like, I don't know, like, is this just because people don't think that Olivia Rodrigo can write a song without ripping somebody else off? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, man. Like, it just seems, I don't know. It seems a little iffy to me.
I saw something that someone brought up where the Blurred Lines case is probably responsible for a lot of this, because that song basically got, which fuck that song anyway, but it basically was ruled that it had the same vibe as another song, and that's
yeah, it's this, like you're saying, it's getting very it's getting very microscopic. Like, we're zooming in on like little parts of songs and saying like, oh, that's, and like, if you compare the Paramore song and you compare it, like that part is the same. Like, and like you said, there's tons of songs that sound like that, like that are in the same genre of music, and like probably, I'm sure tons of like pop punk dudes heard that Paramore song and did that exact part. Like intentionally, like cognitively did that. And I think in this case, they were probably doing that. Like, I think it sounds like an homage to me. Like, I heard it and I was like, yeah, that sounds intentional. And like, this is definitely like, it's just high enough profile that it's just like, of course, we're going to have this case. But at the same time, like, I know why that's similar. I don't necessarily trust a judge to know why that's the same idea.
Yeah.
And Blurred Lines that's a great example. Like, when you start getting into like judges saying, you know, this is rhythmically similar, it's like, do you know that? Like,
right.
And also, like, there's a reason we call 4/4 common time. Like,
can you imagine every song in 4/4 had to credit every other song?
Well, like, what is it? It's that Journey riff that's like in 90% of pop songs too. Like the just like
you can't do. I mean, you can't. There's chord progressions. It can't be the basis. Like, that's. Right. There's only so many chord progressions you can possibly write.
Like some viral video like years ago where someone plays the chord progression, the Don't Stop Believing chord progression, and sings like 50 songs over top of it or something. And that's the thing. That's exactly the crux of it, right? Is like, if we started saying that every person who ever used the same chord progression, you know, like, has to credit every other person. Like, Mitski's gonna be knocking down my door and being like, hey, you owe me royalties for every song you've ever written. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah. It's like Bruce Springsteen owes the Animals a massive paycheck for like directly copying the riff in a song. Like, he says it. Like, he has said it. Like, it's literally an Animals riff. Like.
Oh, and you know what? You know what's actually really interesting is someone made some comparison. There's an Elvis Costello and the Attractions song. It's Pump It Up. The riff in Pump It Up is this almost the same as the riff in Brutal by Olivia Rodrigo. And Elvis Costello was like, yeah, dude, I ripped that riff from Bob Dylan. Like, let her have it. Like, and I'm like, yes, bro. Who gives a shit? Like
interpolation is a thing. Like, it's just a thing that's existed in music forever. Like, I don't think we should be deciding cases on interpolation unless you're just like straight up doing like, oh, that's the exact melody for the exact length of time for the exact, like so on. But even then,
yeah, I mean, you
homages exist.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
Right.
that's the thing is, it's like, I mean, I was telling Justin this like before the pod, like I think copyright's stupid. I mean, just honestly, it's a dumb idea. Like, it's not, if you treated intellectual property like if you took that, the way that we treat intellectual property as a concept and copyright as a concept now, and you took that back through history, like, we would have no polyphony. We would have just like, oh, well, you did the same exact melody as me, so no one's ever going to progress creatively. Like, it's the opposite effect, because you would think like, oh, well, if we don't let them copy someone else, then they'll just like come up with a different idea. But that's not true. Like, you're going to build on what you have heard and say, well, this is a different direction that I can take this idea.
Right.
And folk art proves that. Like, just like all of folk music, which is the basis for half of all popular American music. Like, it's blues and folk music are both genres of music that are like, we're repeating the same ideas and changing them slightly every time. And that is the basis for rock, country, pop. Like,
Right, exactly. And that's why it seems so one-dimensional to me to think about, and I mean, again, like, I can somewhat maybe sort of understand in this case, saying good for you sounds like misery business, therefore we should, credit Hayley Williams as having whatever, like, co-written this song. But it is impossible for us to say this person influenced this person and therefore they need writing credit for this, because in order to do that, then you would have to go back the chain into infinity to find out who influenced misery business and who influenced the song that influenced misery business, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, until the end of time. Like, it isn't practical. And it's also, like you said, it's not the way that making music works. It's not the way that creativity works. It's not the way that artistic progression happens. You have to, everybody's influenced by everybody. And if you don't think that you are, then you're creating art in a vacuum, and that you can't.
I mean, it's already too easy for two people, independent people who have never interacted with each other, to come up with more or less the same idea. Like, it's so easy for that to happen accidentally, where it's just a silly thing. We don't need. Yeah. We don't need, because then there's the whole, like, isn't there like someone using like artificial intelligence to basically like write and copy, like write every possible chord progression and melody and copyright it?
That's
like,
horrible. Oh my god.
There's that AI too that like wrote a Beatles song. It was like, yeah, it sounds like a Beatles song. It doesn't sound good though, but it sounds like one.
Damn, I want to hear that. I need to hear that. That's so funny.
It's very strange. It's like the like Strawberry Fields Forever, like that era Beatles sound that this thing made. It's weird.
Oh, so weird. Oh my god. I love that we're like kind of in sort of like the infancy of AI. I'm sure AI is honestly going to get so scary and just like so dystopian and terrible. But I really like that right now we're in the era where someone's like, I made an AI Travis Scott song. And you're like, nice.
I mean, Brian Eno's probably thrilled, because that's like a part of his whole big thing, his whole concept of generative music, where he's just kind of like feed stuff into a computer, and then just like he is basically like his creative input is deciding what part of it is a song or what part of it is the art, like which I think that's kind of cool. Like, I mean, I was at an art museum one time, and there was a little presentation before we walked through it, and the person held up a rock, I feel like, that was like shaped like a heart, as saying like, is this art? No, because it naturally formed. But in my head, I was like, it is art because it's curatable. A person could see that and say, that looks like a heart, and decide to present it. So that person created a work of art by taking something that they found and applying meaning to it.
Totally.
So,
And also, like, who's the person who decides what art is anyway? Like, who gets to have that privilege? Like, you know?
There's definitely, remember that banana taped to a wall that somebody ate?
Yeah.
That was art.
That was art. It's art. It's all art.
It's a statement. I guess that's what makes it art. But yeah.
the dude eating it was art.
Yeah, that was right. He called himself an artist too. Yeah.
Yeah.
And whoever put the new banana up, they're another artist. That's 3 artists right there.
I mean, it's derivative.
Yeah.
You can make that case. That's fine. But again, I don't know. There are great pieces of art that are directly derivative. Like using my example of Springsteen taking that Animals riff, like the Animals song is fine, but like what he did with it, Badlands, fucking rips.
So sick.
Kick ass song.
Yeah.
Love it.
Hell yeah. Totally.
So anyway, we're just a couple of anarcho punks.
That was my thinking. I was like, punk rock would never do this because everyone would owe, like, well, I guess all the hardcore bands owe Minor Threat money, and all the punk bands owe the Ramones money, and any post-punk band owes, Gang of Four money,
Totally.
They owe a lot of people. They owe Talking Heads. They owe Wire.
Yeah. And I think you can extend that metaphor to any genre, honestly. Like, it all comes from the same place, right? Like, it's all, I don't know, to claim ownership of anything as broad as, like, song structure is just so strange to me.
Yeah, that seems like a good spot to end this episode on. Thank you so much for choosing this album for us to talk about. I really had fun.
Me too. This is so much fun, and y'all are so fun to talk to. This is very cool.
Well, thank you. I was nervous I was going to run out of like Paramore stuff to talk about because I just talked about them. But no, there's plenty more, which is great.
You got a PhD in Paramore now.
Yeah. Well, please tell everyone where we can find Cowboy Boy online.
Oh, so many places to choose from. If you want to, I mean, honestly, the best place to go for any and all things Cowboy Boy is smarturl.it/cowboyboy. You can stream from there. You can buy our record directly from the Get Better website. You can buy it on our Bandcamp. We're on Instagram and Twitter. Pretty easy to find us. I think we're just Cowboy Boy at Cowboy Boy Band on Twitter and at Cowboy Boy _band on Instagram.
Have you ever just Googled Cowboy Boy?
I have. We have one of those like little like Google music thingy things come up now, which is like pretty cool. But prior to that, it was like Cowboy Boy nameplate on Etsy, like cowboy boyfriend outfits for your cowboy boyfriend.
Yeah, I saw a bunch of like boys cowboy outfits for Halloween.
Yeah.
I do like, I love that it has the little artist thing on the Google musical group thing that pops up on the side with like all the useful links, but then like the main search results are like you're all mostly on the top search results, but it's also like Cowboy by Kid Rock.
Yeah!
And like all of the images are just little boys in cowboy outfits.
Bane of my existence. I need to get somebody on my SEO like real quick. I'm gonna contract somebody out.
That reminded me, we had the band we had the lead singer of Bad Sandy on our show, and like her, when you just Google Bad Sandy, you just get pictures of Sandy from Grease.
Oh my god, hilarious. In her like black cat suit.
Yeah.
Oh that's so funny. Bad Sandy. That is fucking hilarious.
Camp Trash is another fun one to Google image search because it's like the band is like about half of the search results, pictures of the band, but then also the other half are like just pictures of trash at campsites. Littered campgrounds.
Oh my god, literal camp trash. That's so funny. Oh my god.
And the last thing we always ask is for our guests to shout out or name a charity or nonprofit that you'd like to bring some attention to.
Ooh, very cool. Cool. The charity that I want to shout out is for the girls. Girls spelled GWORLS. Specifically, the medical fund providing medical care, gender-affirming medical care to queer, trans people of color. Yeah, shouts out to them. If you ever have a spare, dollar to donate and you don't want to buy something from us on Bandcamp, or even if you do, I would rather you donate that extra buck to them, because they're doing important work, especially, in 2021. We want our, trans siblings to have all of the life-saving, gender-affirming care that they could possibly have.
Yeah, that's a good organization. We've had a few people shout them out, and they're a good one to donate to.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much for doing the show. This is a lot of fun.
Thank you all so much. This was a pleasure. Lots of fun.